All right, I'm ready to jump into Amos 9. Now, Amos 9 is going to continue kind of on the same track. In fact, I think there's some argument on whether there should be a hard break between Amos 8 and 9. But it does seem like now Amos is seeing a different scene. Amos 9, I see the Lord standing beside the altar. Now, which altar? Because Israel had the northern kingdom had some different altars than the southern kingdom, which would have had Jerusalem. Is he talking about Jerusalem? Is he talking about the northern altars? I don't know. Probably both. It doesn't really matter. A lot of scholars say it doesn't really matter which altar. It's just generally true. If we were to rely a little bit on Hosea, we could probably distinguish that to say probably most likely the northern altars, because we are going to deal with the Assyrian invasion, and Hosea is going to give a little bit more clarity about that. But for Amos specifically, and for the ultimate fulfillment of Amos 9, if you're looking at the ultimate sense, it doesn't matter if it's north or south, it's just the altars. And what does the Lord say? Strike the capitals until the thresholds shake and shatter them on the heads of the people. Now, a lot of people read that in the English translation and they assume we're talking about earthquakes. And that's a fair assumption. But in the actual Hebrew text, striking the capitals until the threshold shakes and shattering them on the heads, the more literal translation would be to sever the heads of the pillars and sever the heads of the priesthood. It's tough. It's judgment language that is depicting beheading. It's not just earthquake. It's severing the heads of the pillars of the capital. The pillars of the temple, or the pillars of the altar, whether that's the temple in the south or the altars in the north, it doesn't matter. It's kind of a universal judgment that God's proclaiming here, that to sever the heads of the altars and sever the heads of the priesthood, and to pursue all of those who have aligned themselves with wickedness, all those exploiters of the poor that we talked about in the last chapter. God is going to seek justice for the poor, and he's going to deal with those who've aligned themselves with sin. So once Israel's rebellion has really come to fullness, it's really complete, God uses Israel's adversaries to uproot them from the land and slay the unrepentant leaders. God sifts the population of Israel, which we're going to look at here in Amos 9, to remove and even literally behead the unrepentant before inaugurating the Messianic age, and an age of permanent security and abundance, which Amos is going to describe. That's a part of Amos 9 that's yet unfulfilled in the permanent, ultimate sense. So look at what God says in verse 2. Wherever they try to get to, the population has to flee the land, because the curses of Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28 are beginning to fully manifest. Israel's being invaded, people are being slaughtered, and God himself is hunting the escapees, the refugees who rejected his covenant and who remain unrepentant. And he uses adversarial nations as his instrument of judgment. So whether they dig to Sheol, if they hide themselves at the top of Carmel, wherever they try to go, they try to hide from my sight at the bottom of the sea. Even if they go into captivity before their enemies, I will command the sword, and they will not be spared. I will fix my eyes upon them. Ooh, that's terrifying. And this is a little bit of reversal of positive language. From the time of Solomon, when Solomon dedicated the temple, God said, my eyes will be toward this place, with a affectionate attentiveness, that God will be attentive to the prayers offered in Israel. And instead, Israel has rejected the covenant, and now God says, my eyes are going to be fixed on you in a different way, in a jealous way, and in a wrathful way, but not in a totality of God's wrath, as Amos is going to be sure to clarify, and as Hosea will as well, which we're going to look at here in a moment. But look, he says, I'll fix my eyes upon you for evil and not for good. He just has to clarify it. It's just, it's that much more painful. Because a lot of us pray, God, set your eyes on me, be watchful over me, protect me, provide for me. But that also comes with, if you rebel against God's covenant, if Israel rebels against God's covenant, then God's eyes remain fixed, but it's for evil and not for good. It's to correct their alignment, their agreement with wickedness. which Hosea is really going to outline. So anyway, we'll get to that. I always want to jump ahead. I get excited about it because they really do blend together. It's a cohesive message across the whole scope of the biblical narrative, across all the altars. It's a fascinating thing to see when you get to study it together like this. So anyway, I should just lean into that a little bit. The Lord God of hosts, he who touches the earth and it melts. Okay, now Amos is starting to get into some of the descriptions of God's greatness that we referenced back in different Psalms. Psalm 2, Psalm 68, Psalm 104. He's drawing from God's greatness, even describing God's judgment of wickedness. And he's saying, Israel, you found yourself in the hot seat. You found yourself as a recipient of that God who judges wickedness, who fights on behalf of the poor. That same God is now having to challenge you, is now having to resist and challenge you. That's who you're facing. It's kind of terrifying. And then it goes on to say, are you not like the Cushites? Are you not like the pagan people who are distant from the land? Are you not like those who were outside of my covenant, O people of Israel? Did I not bring you out of the land of Egypt? And he's just really appealing to, why are you doing this? Why are you being a people of enmity? And he goes on to say in verse 8, if you can see it there, the eyes of the Lord are upon the sinful kingdom. He calls Israel, in this case, in the state of their rebellion, a sinful kingdom. And I will destroy you from the surface of the ground. But wait, except I'm not going to utterly destroy you. I'm not going to nullify my covenant. I'm not going to disqualify you from my covenant, but I will save the house of Jacob. And I will save the covenant. And Hosea is going to mention this as well. The covenant is not going to be completely ignored. God's wrath is not going to extend to the complete destruction of Israel. No. Israel's promise is not over. The covenant is not over, but it will be saved. For look what he says. For behold, I will command and shake the house of Israel among the nations as one shakes a sieve. It's sifting. He's sifting Israel among the nations and saying, I'm not going to allow the sinful to escape. Let me scroll down a little bit more. The sinners of my people will die by the sword. They're not going to escape. When he says the pebble is not going to fall to the earth, all of the sinners are going to be caught. They're not going to escape the judgment. But the repentant, those who turn to the Lord, will inherit God's covenant and his promises. And so it's not accurate to say that Amos is pronouncing the complete nullification of God's covenant with Israel or Israel's redemptive role in God's plan. That's not the case, because he's saying, no, I am going to save you, but I'm going to sift you. And those who are unrepentant and who, like Moses would have said back in Deuteronomy 29, he says, even on that day when you have a covenant renewal, if you partake of that covenant wrongly, then you're sifted out, you're removed. And there's the people who are repentant who will inherit the covenant promises and see the whole face of the earth renewed in a messianic age of awesome abundance and fulfillment and salvation, all those things. But we've got to deal with removing the consequences of sin and those sinful leaders who've exploited the poor. They actually need to have justice. So there we go. Now let's jump down to verse 11. Again, we're in Amos 9. Oh, it's beautiful. Amos describes the messianic age. Again, because he's saying, no, the story's not over. Verse 8, I'm not going to utterly destroy the house of Jacob. No, this is where this is going to go to. This is actually a redemptive intervention to produce covenant fulfillment, the most redemptive outcome. So in that day, I will raise up the booth of David. Now, in that day, we're back to in that day. In that day is something we looked at all the way back in Amos 8. It's that kind of prophetic language that's hinting to, yeah, we may be talking about some historical fulfillment things, but we're really talking about the ultimate covenant fulfillment of God's redemptive plan. In that day, I will raise up the booth of David that has fallen. Now, the booth of David, God's really going, what we're talking about here is God's going to fulfill his covenant promises to David, which we looked at last week, to restore his royal lineage as Israel's messianic king rules from Jerusalem with a purified house of prayer, which will be the messianic temple. Repair, rebuild, and restore applies to David's royal lineage, the throne in Jerusalem, and the tabernacle in Jerusalem. All three were part of David's covenant. And so some scholars will say, well, what is this talking about? Is this about the city itself, the temple itself, or just David's lineage? And all of that, I think prophetically is just answered yes. The Davidic covenant is going to be rebuilt, its breaches restored. And that includes the throne, the city, the temple. I think that's all. I think you can safely combine those interpretations there. Alrighty. Verse 12, that they may possess the remnant of Edom. Now, this is referenced back in Psalm 47, saying that God gives us our adversaries are put under our feet. That's what's happening here. They're going to possess the remnant of Edom, meaning they're given authority over their former adversaries. Behold, the days are coming when the plowman will overtake the reaper. Oh, he just goes on to describe this messianic age of just absurd abundance. Like the harvest is so great that the reaper doesn't even have time to collect it all before it becomes time to replant. The cities are rebuilt. The inhabitants dwell in the land with untroubled security. I'll restore the fortunes of my people. They'll rebuild the ruined cities and inhabit them. They'll plant vineyards and drink. The gardens will eat their fruit. I will plant them in the land, and they will never again be uprooted out of the land that I have given to them. Now that's a very permanent type of restoration. Now that restoration could not have been true of the generation of Jesus' first coming, because of course they were uprooted again when Rome really came through and destroyed Israel in that first century AD. And so Amos has long awaited a future fulfillment of a day when Israel will be permanently put in the land. And even though we do have Israel in the land right now, present day of the time of my writing this, I think that there's an even more permanent fulfillment of this yet to come. I don't necessarily think it'd be hard for me to say from where I sit today that I would expect Israel to be fully uprooted from the land in any kind of near-term future. But I think really the inauguration of the Messianic age is the sure fulfillment of you're never going to be uprooted. Your Messianic king is here. All your adversaries have been placed under your feet. That obviously has not happened yet today. So that's something we still are waiting for yet future for a ultimate fulfillment in the Messianic age. Oh boy, there's Obadiah. But you know what? We're going to have to come back to Obadiah another week.